Tonight, the world is staring at one narrow strip of water that can shake the entire global economy in a matter of hours. Just one day after Iran said the Strait of Hormuz was open again, Tehran reversed course on April 18th and announced that the waterway was back under strict military control. Reports from AP and Reuters say Iranian forces fired on ships trying to pass, while the US kept its blockade on Iranian ports in place. That means this is no longer just a military standoff. This is now a direct contest over oil, shipping, pressure, and political will. Around 1/5 of the world's oil and gas moves through this route, and even a short disruption can send shockwaves across fuel prices, trade routes, and financial markets. For viewers trying to understand what really matters tonight, this is the headline: the Strait of Hormuz is once again the pressure point of the world economy, and the ceasefire optimism of April 17th has already started to collapse. What makes this story so dramatic is how fast the situation flipped. On April 17th, Iran had signaled that commercial traffic could resume during the Lebanon ceasefire, and that announcement triggered a sharp market reaction. Reuters reported oil prices fell about 10%, and stocks jumped because traders believed the worst supply fears might be easing. But by April 18th, that brief moment of relief was gone. Reuters and AP reported that Iran reimposed restrictions, said control of the strait had returned to the armed forces, and tied any genuine reopening to the lifting of the US naval blockade on Iranian ports. In other words, Iran was not offering a full return to normal shipping. It was signaling conditional access. And when Washington refused to back down, Tehran answered with force. That is the real story here. This was never a clean reopening. It was a test, and that test broke almost immediately. Now the strategic question becomes simple. Why does Hormuz matter so much? Because this is one of the most important maritime choke points on Earth. Reuters, AP, and UNCTAD have all emphasized that disruptions there do not stay local. They hit oil flows, gas shipments, marine insurance, freight costs, and broader supply chains. Reuters reported that more than a dozen tankers moved through when the strait briefly reopened, but hundreds of ships were still stranded, and flows remained disrupted. Another Reuters report said 5 LNG vessels from Qatar were approaching the strait, underlining how closely the world was watching whether transit could resume. When this choke point becomes unstable, importers from Asia to Europe start calculating risk in real time. That is why this is bigger than the US and Iran. It affects energy consumers everywhere, and it turns one regional confrontation into a global economic threat. The political fight underneath all this is just as important as the naval one. AP reported that the US says its blockade on Iranian ports will remain until an agreement is reached on Iran's nuclear program. AP also reported the US military said it had forced 23 ships to turn around near the strait since the blockade began on April 13th. From Tehran's point of view, reopening Hormuz while its own ports remain under blockade would look like surrender under pressure. From Washington's point of view, lifting the blockade too early would mean giving up leverage before a permanent deal is secured. That is why this confrontation keeps tightening. Both sides are trying to prove they control the terms of access, the terms of pressure, and the terms of negotiation. So when Iran says freedom of navigation must apply to Iranian shipping too, and the US says the blockade stays until there is a deal, what we are watching is not just a military standoff. It is a bargaining war being fought through ships, choke points, and economic pain. Another reason this story is exploding is that the danger is no longer theoretical. Reuters reported that India raised deep concern after 2 Indian-flagged ships were attacked while attempting to cross the Strait of Hormuz on April 18. AP likewise reported that multiple vessels came under fire, including India-flagged ships. Even without mass casualties, these incidents change everything because they show that the route is not merely politically contested, it is physically hazardous. Shipping companies, insurers, and governments do not need a full naval war to panic. They just need proof that vessels can be targeted, and once that happens, the commercial logic changes fast. Captains hesitate, insurers raise premiums, cargoes stall, and governments start treating every passage as a security operation instead of normal trade. This is how a strategic crisis becomes an economic chain reaction, one ship movement at a time. So where does this go next? Based on the latest reporting, there are two competing futures. One is that diplomacy, including mediation efforts referenced by AP and Reuters, pulls both sides back from the brink and restores some version of managed shipping. The other is that each side hardens its position, more vessels are challenged, and the global energy shock deepens. Britain's Foreign Secretary said on April 18th that full resumption of shipping is urgently needed, and Reuters noted that more than 50 nations support freedom of navigation, with over a dozen ready to offer maritime assistance once conditions allow. That tells you the world understands the stakes. But tonight, the reality is harsh. The market optimism of April 17th has already run into the military reality of April 18th. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a news headline anymore. It is the front line where diplomacy, energy, trade, and geopolitical power are colliding in real time, and the next move from Tehran or Washington could hit not only the Middle East, but wallets, markets, and governments across the world. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for daily updates. Until the next time.